Padmasana, Lotus Pose, the ultimate shape in yoga of enlightenment. Let's bring it down off the pedestal. I really want to talk about this shape, and I want to talk about it in the context of saving your knees. So it's really important that people understand their own body when it comes to this posture, because there's going to be some people watching this that really shouldn't be practicing this pose. And that's good, and that's okay. A lot of injuries come from practicing this pose, injuries to the meniscus, and we're going to talk about why. The biggest bone factor that's going to allow somebody to practice this pose or limit someone from practicing this pose is going to be the shape inside your hip socket and the way that the head of your femur, your thigh bone, meets your hip socket. Because if a person doesn't have enough natural external range of motion, which is really about the shape of your bones, then what your hips can't give you, your knees are going to try and make up for. We don't want that. So I can tell you from personal experience that I used to really force myself into this shape. Full lotus or half lotus all the time, and I would get quite a strong burning, pulling sensation on my medial side of my knees, and I just thought to myself, one day my knees will open, or must just be part of the posture, or I should just sit into this discomfort because I've been told by the teacher in the room that if I just try hard enough, this pose is accessible to me. That is a lie. That is not true. And I want to save your knees. And I also want to remind you that this shape is just a shape. It doesn't mean anything. It's not going to bring with it any kind of enlightenment. That's internal work. So I may have begun by bursting your bubble, but I really want to talk to you about the importance of this. Okay? So the test for whether or not your natural bone shape, which is something that's not going to change from your yoga practice PS, allows for this would be, I'm going to stand up, for you to be able to have flexion in your hip and also in your knee, and to be able to externally rotate your femur enough that you could bring this heel up onto the front of this hip crease without any rotation happening at your knee. I don't have that, so I can't show you what that looks like for someone who naturally has that, which was my issue. So because that's kind of the max of my external rotation there, to get this heel up onto the front of my hip, I would have to drag and pull, which would mean I'm rotating my tibia, which means I'm forcing a lot of stress into this part of my knee. Not good. Not a good idea. Maybe you're trying this already. If you are able to do that, that you've got enough external rotation that you can bring that, hands are now feet, yeah? That you can bring that heel up onto this hip crease and your knee is still in pure flexion, that it hasn't rotated, then this pose is available for you. Maybe you're right on the cusp and you can come into that pose and you've got both heels up on the hip creases, but maybe 10 seconds in or 20 seconds in, you start to get a nagging, pulling sensation here. That is your body's way of saying, please come out. This shape is not great for you. We never want to feel that here. So at the medial sides of your knees and the lateral sides of your knees, you've got, this is now part of a knee, you've got ligaments on either side that are there to prevent your femur and tibia from sliding sideways off each other. On the medial side, a portion of that ligament attaches directly onto your meniscus, which is the cushioning cartilage inside your knee. So if you're stressing out your knee and it's twisting and pulling because you're already at compression in your hip, depending on how often you're doing this, you're going to be pulling on that. So if you're pulling on where that ligament attaches to the meniscus, that is the perfect set of conditions for you to possibly tear that. Not good. And if you know some stuff about anatomy, you'll know that ligaments and cartilage are predominantly avascular, which means they don't have a big blood supply. So if that gets injured, and sometimes it can get injured quite severely, it is going to take a really long time to heal and quite possibly never return to the feeling that it had before it was injured. So prevention is better than cure. Definitely applies to anything when it comes to the medial side of the knee and the meniscus. So if we talk about compression again for just a moment, when something is compressed, aka the head of your femur inside your hip socket, or the head of the femur pressing against the edge of your hip socket, there's nowhere to go. No amount of moving the calf out of the way or shifting the femur back and all these little tricks and tips that yoga teachers tell their students to do to get into Padmasana is going to help. Once you are compressed, there's nowhere to go. But if you keep putting force in that direction, the next joint down or the next joint up will have to be the thing that moves, because that's just basic physics and biomechanics. If you've got force and energy being pushed in a certain direction, something's going to have to give. And the thing that gives will give because it can. So because your knee's got a little bit of margin to rotate when the knee is bent, that's the thing that's going to move. But we don't really want that. So I ask you to sit, pun intended, with that and just think about what it is that you want to gain from this posture. If you're someone who's been struggling with it, and if you're someone who's thinking, oh my gosh, that's me, or yeah, I do feel that in my knees. Because it's not the shape that matters. It doesn't matter. How do you feel when you're inside that posture? Do you feel calm? Do you feel like you're able to drop into a meditative state? Because you could get that sitting in a chair. You could get that seated cross-legged. If there are some compressive things coming up in the hips and you're trying to find your version of a meditation posture, sometimes it's helpful to get the hips up a little bit higher. So one thing that I quite like to do is to sit on blocks. Oh, but I like a VIP seat, so I usually take two side by side as opposed to the classic one. And then with that, oh, that's nice. This would be my version of Padmasana. So my feet are coming in toward my groin. My femurs are actually turning inward a little bit, and this feels really good on my knees. So this would be my preference of a shape personally if I'm looking for a posture where I might be working on my breath, doing some pranayama practice, or meditating at the end of a class. So the takeaway for this really is pay attention to the medial side of your knees if you're coming into any posture that's Padmasana-like, or anything where you are externally or internally rotating your hip to its end range of motion and you've also got the knee bent. That is your body's way of saying to you, hey, this is not okay. Please come out of the shape. Please don't override your pain signals because of an ideal that you're trying to get from your practice. Think about the spirit or the intention that's within a pose, or what it has available to you, not what the alignment should be. If you found this yoga troubleshooting video helpful, here are some more that you can check out. And I'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe.